outside the 10. Carr jumps it in and it's Waller. He spins into the end zone for the touchdown. Watching greatness on one end in LeBron. There's a dude with 35 in white getting it done defensively and then offense taking over the fight. Mama, there goes that man.
They have shared a brilliant championship battle, but the championship can only be won by one, and it's going Dutch in 2021. Max Verstappen, for the first time ever, is champion of the world.
Hello everybody and welcome to this week's edition of the Waterboy Experience. I am of course your host, the Waterboy himself, Davis McLemore, and I've got some fairly fresh hot sport news. Arch Manning's heading to Texas, Deshaun Watson is still in trouble, and so is Vince McMahon. Nondescript motorsports, as well as part 2 of the exclusive interview with the Manchester Hooligan, Bog Kyle Kavanaugh. And to help me fuck this dog of a show is my good friend and bitter rival, the CEO and CFO of Nye Productions, the Red Bull chugging son of a gun, and the 25th accuser in the Deshaun Watson case, Jason Shaddix. Jason, how are you?
I thought we agreed that you should keep that last saying quiet.
Well, you didn't make me sign an NDA, so I can say whatever I want.
I'll see you in court.
No, you'll see Deshaun Watson in court, if you want to take him to court. But if you know what, you know, there might be a phase of speak out, where everybody starts speaking out about everything, and if you want to wait till then, that's okay. I understand if you're scared. He's just Deshaun Watson. You don't have to be scared, man. Why don't you tell everybody about your experience with him? Did he splooge on your face?
It was horrible. It was horrible.
Did you splooge on his face?
We will not talk about that. No, but in all seriousness, this again has become the Deshaun Watson podcast because he has been in the news again, and this time it has gone into a big controversy with NFL fans. Do you want to explain to us what happened?
So supposedly the rumor is that they're only going to suspend him for about 6 to 8 games.
Wow. How much did that football player that was betting get? What was his suspension?
Oh, you're talking about, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure that was Calvin Ridley of the Atlanta Falcons. He was betting on games, and he was suspended for a year. Now, yes, what he did was wrong, and he should have been suspended. But when you're talking about Deshaun Watson, who, at the very least, sexually assaulted about 24 women, 25, including Jason here, then how is that fair at all? Tell me in what universe is this fair?
It's not fair, and it actually shows that the integrity of football is more important than, sexually assaulting 24 women and possibly even more that are not willing to come out. So it really just shows, what the NFL stance really is, and Roger Goodell's.
And we've been saying it for the past several episodes now. I don't want him to even be in the league after all this, I mean, in what world should he play another game if all of this is true?
I can't wait until the 2 lawsuits go to court and he gets found out for the criminal that he is, the sexual assaulter that he is, and he gets his justice, because once that comes out, you know what the NFL's going to say? Oh, my bad. Our investigation wasn't that great, even though, we could have just waited until the court system did its thing.
That's true. Like, anything less than a year is absolutely outrageous.
Anything
and a year is even ridiculous.
Anything less than a total firing, termination of contract is ridiculous.
So would you accept like a 3-year suspension?
I'd fire him on the dot, be like, you're not allowed to play in the NFL ever again.
See, there was a player, Alden Smith. He actually was a defensive end for the Raiders. But at one point, he had a DUI, and I think he beat his wife or something like that. And he was suspended for like 2-3 years.
Remember that Raiders player that got fired because he was threatening a woman on a live stream and even pulled out a gun?
He didn't get suspended. I think he got fined.
No, he got fired.
Well, yeah, he got fired because the Raiders released him. That was Mark Davis's decision. But
exactly. So they're willing to fire that guy over threatening to assault somebody. Why don't they fire somebody who has, 24 cases of sexual assault against him, even though he settled 20 of those 4, if I'm right, or 22 or something like that? Settling doesn't really mean you're innocent. Settling means one of the 2 parties could not continue fighting this in court, because court is expensive. You're spending thousands of dollars there.
But with as many accusations as there are against Deshaun Watson, you can't help but stack up all of these cases and you look at them and you're like, sure, 1 or 2 is coincidental. We can overlook that. But 24, 25 is outrageous. And there's no reason in my eyes why he should ever play in the NFL again. But they're going to just give him a slap on the wrist, and he's going to come back and he's going to play, and, it's just going to be that way.
In MLB, there's this pitcher for the Los Angeles Dodgers who was accused by, I think, 2 women or at least 1 woman of sexual assault, and he has been suspended since 2019, 2020, something like that. And more than likely, he's never going to play another game of baseball.
No, and that wouldn't surprise me if he doesn't.
So why is the MLB able to look at that and say, yeah, we're going to suspend you? And then eventually they're going to fire him. But the NFL doesn't. And the NFL is like, oh, okay, you only get a 6 to 8 game suspension. That's like, what the fuck?
Well, and if you'll remember, this might have been before you got into the NFL, but the owner of the Patriots, Robert Kraft, he actually was about to go to jail for prostitution.
Who would pay for him? Ugh.
He got off on a misdemeanor charge, so.
Yeah, after he donated a few million
No.
to the mayor.
He was hiring prostitutes.
Well, ain't nothing wrong with hiring a few prostitutes every now and then.
Paralegals.
They're in the right area for that. They're in the right area of the country for that.
Let's move on straight to the Vince McMahon stuff. Is there anything? There's not really much new news there, is there?
No, there's not much news. It's just, fans are speculating that Vince McMahon...
It's ongoing.
And Vince McMahon is still in charge, even though he stepped down as CEO and chairman. And, I mean, he owns, 49%.
He definitely is.
Yeah, he owns 49% of the company's shares. So, I mean, what can they really do to him without buying him out? And that company's worth, $7 billion. So you're spending around $2-3 billion to pay him out.
We actually had this conversation off air yesterday about, what they could do. How could they get him out? Could Fox cancel him off TV and all that stuff? And, it's really interesting because it's like he's built himself a wall to kind of protect himself. But how long do you think that wall is going to hold up for him?
That depends on how many more cases come out of him having a relationship with somebody at work.
Because they found more NDAs, right?
Yes, they found more NDAs, and there's also always been rumors in the early 2000s when they got the private jet. Apparently, John Laurinaitis would stand outside the jet, not let anybody in, while Vince McMahon and a few of the divas, as they were called back then, were having personal conversations with Vince McMahon.
And I'm wondering, not even just stories about, sexual interactions, but what if there's other NDAs that have to do with other things that are even worse?
Well, one thing, and in one of the podcasts we're actually working on, we're going to talk about the Nancy Argentino case where professional wrestler Jimmy Superfly Snuka killed his wife. And it's not even allegedly, all the evidence points to it was not an accident. He killed her.
Vince covered it up?
Yes, and it's said that Vince McMahon paid off the Allentown police to essentially not investigate the case anymore because the coroner found that this does not look like an accident where she fell and hit her head on the side of the road like Jimmy was saying. No, this looks like it was blunt trauma and she was just bleeding out internally.
So, let's say if they dig up that case and they find some NDAs and all that. If they dig up that case and decide to reopen it, Jimmy Superfly Snuka is obviously dead. Could they charge Vince McMahon with something?
Yes, they would charge the police members who, I think one of them's a judge now, for accepting a bribe, and they would charge him for bribing a police officer to stay quiet to cover up a murder. Because there's
could they also get him on what's it called? Murder, conspiring for murder or something like that, because in a way he is kind of involved in it with covering up.
No, because you're thinking conspiracy to do a murder or manslaughter or something like that. No, because he didn't have anything to do with the actual murder itself. That was just Jimmy Snuka. There have been stories of him hitting his wife and all that. There's even stories from Buddy Rogers, the wrestler, who talked about I was friends with him for a while and then I saw how he treated his wife and I'm like, fuck you, I'm not gonna fucking talk to you, you piece of shit. And there's that, but he didn't do the murder. He covered up the murder, which is embedding an investigation, I believe. So he can't get charged for that because there's no statute of limitations because it revolves around a murder.
Okay. Well, we'll see how that develops if anything comes out about Jimmy Snuka. Anything new that we've never even heard of. Could there be something that comes out about Owen Hart, maybe?
Well, that one was an accident.
It was an accident, but there's a lot, like the lawsuits and everything with the Owen Hart. A lot of people put Vince as responsible for that accident.
That was just a freak nature accident. They did go to court, and Vince, I think, lost because they were using footage from Owen Hart that Owen's wife owns the rights to. So that's been settled, and they can't go to court for that again.
Okay, I got you. Well, moving on to some news about a young player who I think is going to be an absolute stud when he makes his way into the NFL, like his uncles before him and his grandfather. Arch Manning has committed to Texas, and this is a little bit of old news, but we're going to cover it right now. I've actually met Arch Manning. It was a few years back. He went to Isidore Newman High School, and we were at a speech and debate tournament, and I was walking down the hall, and this dude, I looked at him for a second, and I was like, wait a minute, he kind of looks like a Manning, but I didn't even think anything of it, and it was a short interaction. He was like, are you lost? And I was like, yeah, a little bit. I'm looking for math building or whatever. And he was like, well, it's going to be right down there and all that stuff, and he shook my hand. He said, I'm Arch. I said, I'm Davis. And I had no idea who he was. He said Arch, and I was like, yeah, he looks like a mix between Cooper and Eli to me. And he's tall. He's so tall. like I was looking up at him like ridiculous. But at the time I was like, oh, his name's Arch. Okay, I get you. But and that was it. And then I start seeing on the news more and more, Arch Manning does this, Arch Manning does that, and I'm just like, whoa, I've met him before. And it was crazy. But yeah, so I don't even know if he remembers who I am. He probably doesn't, but I remember him.
Which says a lot about his, his presence as a person that he could stick in your mind, really.
He's in my mind. He's there when I close my eyes. I see him in the mirror. No, I don't. I'm kidding. But yeah, it was kind of cool. Like, I can say that I've met Arch Manning before he was anybody, I guess. My grandfather actually met Brett Favre before he was big.
Yeah, and good thing Arch Manning didn't break your windshield.
He owes him a new windshield. That's another story for another time. But, so yeah, he's going to Texas. I was kind of hoping he would go to Ole Miss, like his grandfather and his uncle Eli. But, Texas will be a good fit, and I think this year's recruiting class for Texas, because if you remember this past year's draft, this was the first year, I think ever, that Texas didn't have a player picked in the draft at all. So I think you're going to see a big change. You're going to see a lot of the top wide receivers and running backs and offensive linemen. They're going to want to go play for Texas because the best quarterback in the country is going there. This next year's recruiting class is going to be pretty impressive for Texas, and it's going to be the best one that they've had in a while. So just keep your eye on them.
Yeah, I remember reading the article that ESPN, when it broke the news that he signed with Texas, and they mentioned how they were very surprised, and pretty much everybody was surprised that he would go to Texas and not go to, you said Ole Miss, but really Alabama or Georgia, because right now those are two of the top schools in the nation, and he is the most watched athlete in the country right now. That's, high schooler going into college. He's the most looked at, most scouted, and everybody wanted him to play for their college. So him choosing Texas, I hope it's a right move for not only him, but, the college, because, Alabama is great. They've been one of the best college teams in recent memory, and Georgia is starting to get up there again, especially after beating Alabama this past year.
And actually, this was the other day, Texas actually recruited a wide receiver, one of the best wide receiver recruits in the country, Jonte Cook II. That's already an improvement for Texas. You have one of the best quarterbacks, probably the best quarterback in this recruiting class, and you have one of the top wide receivers in the recruiting class. I really think Texas is going to turn something around. We might see them compete for, are they in the Big 10 or the Big 12?
I'm not sure.
Well, it's weird because the Big 10 has 12 teams. The Big 12 has 10 teams. It's all messed up. But yeah, so keep an eye on Texas this year because they might pose a little bit of a threat. If not, they'll show improvements from last year. Now on to my favorite part of the show, the nondescript motorsports.
Well, actually, the Stanley Cup happened, the final game happened this past weekend, and the Avalanche team beat the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Oh, so the Tampa Bay Lightning didn't get a three-peat.
I don't know what that means, but they didn't win. Now,
they win back-to-back world championships.
Oh, no, they didn't do a triple crown.
Dang. Well, good for the Avalanche. That's kind of impressive.
But now on to...
Oh, no, wait. We also have to say, our home state boys, Ole Miss, wins the College World Series in baseball.
How could we forget that?
Almost forgot it. But yeah, they beat Oklahoma, and I mean, I was surprised they made it because I didn't think they could do it because they were good all the way through the season, and then it's like the last part of the season they just kind of dropped, and they weren't even in the top 10. I mean, Southern Miss was ranked higher than they were, but they beat Southern Miss, and they beat other teams, and to cap it all off, they beat Oklahoma, and they won the College World Series. So that's back-to-back years that a Mississippi college has won the World Series.
Anyway, let's get on to nondescript motorsports. There was no Formula One race this past weekend, but there is going to be
boring.
Yeah, it was boring. But there is going to be a race this coming weekend, and it's going to be the Silverstone Grand Prix in the UK. So that's like a hometown race for pretty much all the teams. And we got some news about some stuff in Formula One. So let me just say one other news, and that's that Porsche revealed their 963 LMDH car for WEC and MISA. So that's going to be the new Le Mans car for next year.
Ooh. Do you think they're going to do good? Does Porsche usually do good? Does Porsche usually do good for these 24 hours of Le Mans?
It's mostly been Toyota the last few years, but they're also a really good team. They did win part of Le Mans, but not in the hypercar series. It's just going to be interesting to see how they do the following year.
You say Porsche was going to get into Formula One?
Porsche and Audi were going to be in Formula One. We don't know in what capacity. Some people think that either Porsche or Audi are going to supply engines to the team, or Porsche or Audi are going to start a team, and one of the others is going to be the supplier.
But there's also going to be an Andretti Racing team. Are they going to partner up with one of those, or?
We don't know if they'll let Andretti Racing in there. For some reason, they don't want that family to come into the field, and I don't understand why, because they have the money. They said, yeah, we can be up and running by next year.
Historic racing team, too.
Yeah, and I think the dad has been in Formula One.
Mario Andretti, yeah.
Exactly. So I don't know what's going on there, but I do have some Formula One news in that AlphaTauri has confirmed Pierre Gasly will stay with the team throughout the 2023 season.
Ooh, so he's not going to move up to Red Bull and get that new seat?
No, because Checo is signed until 2024.
That's right, yeah.
And I think I know why he's been confirmed by AlphaTauri. And last week, or about 2 weeks ago, the story broke out that Red Bull Junior Academy driver Yuri Vips had been suspended pending an investigation by Red Bull. Now, essentially, in a Twitch stream, he said the N-word. And, immediately, the Red Bull was like, okay, we're going to suspend you from everything. And we're going to talk to you. We're going to figure out what the hell happened. Well, they've ended up terminating his contract this week. And he's no longer a Red Bull driver. And he was actually a reserve driver for the main team and also a test driver. So at that point, they were willing to, I guess, give him a seat in AlphaTauri because everybody was thinking that Pierre Gasly wasn't going to stay in AlphaTauri and it was going to be Yuri Vips. And then after that broke, Pierre Gasly was said to be confirmed for AlphaTauri. And then they said, yeah, we terminated his contract. And what's interesting, his Formula 2 team said that he's going to stay with the team because the owner of the team said, yeah, I talked to him and I told him, look, I do not like that language that you use, but I'm going to give you a chance to prove to everybody that you're a better person. And what kind of pissed me off was he said the N-word. And a lot of people were saying, well, he didn't say it to anybody. I don't understand why it's such a big deal. Everybody's such a snowflake. And some people say, well, he's young. He can learn from his mistakes. And it's like, okay, he may be young, but he's not like a 12-year-old kid. He's a nearly 20-year-old man who said the N-word during a live stream. And it's like, I don't care if he didn't say it to somebody else. You still said that word.
Right. It's, you're not supposed to say that. It's universal. You don't say that. But you're still going to go out and say it. Even though you're not saying it to somebody, it doesn't matter. It's unprofessional.
Exactly. And if you can defend that, that just shows where you stand on this, because you cannot call somebody the N-word or just say the N-word if you're a white male. Well, if you're a white person, because that's just, there's a history that shows that
right.
That wasn't a good thing to say, and they never said it with good intentions.
It doesn't matter the reason why you can't say it. It's just one of those things you just don't say because it's universally known that is offensive and it's a derogatory term. And especially in the publicity and the public eye that he's in, why would you say that? Why would you even just in a Twitch stream just naturally say that? That's not...
If I believe right, he was playing Call of Duty and he said it after he got killed.
There's no reason to say that. Why don't you just say fuck? Or something.
Exactly. Why do you say that word? That really just shows your true colors, if you ask me.
Right.
But anyway, that happened to Yuri, a talented driver, but, honestly, I think
Stupid person.
Stupid person. I think Formula 2, the team, is going to drop him. Formula 2, the organization itself, is not happy with the team keeping him on. So that'll be something to watch out for. But if he does finish out the season, he's not going to get renewed. They're not going to allow it. But
As he shouldn't.
yes, he shouldn't. But keeping with this trend of saying things that you shouldn't say, 3-time world champion Nelson Piquet has been condemned by the racing world for an interview he did last year where he called Lewis Hamilton and I don't know how to pronounce this because this is Portuguese, but it's essentially calling somebody the N-word as well. But this word also has a different meaning because you can also use it in a way that means bro. It said Neguinho, something like that. That's the word. But he said that about Lewis Hamilton when he was talking about the incident in Italy. He said, quote, the Neguinho put the car in the wrong way on the corner. It's because you don't know the curve. It's a very high curve. There is no way to pass two cars, and there's no way you can put the car on the side. He did Verstappen dirty. His luck was that only the other one was gone. That's what he said. But it's the fact that he said that word, which his family is trying to say that, no, he didn't mean it as saying the N-word, because this word, you can also use it essentially.
It's a different meaning.
Yeah, you could say it as bro. And a lot of people who are Portuguese or from Brazil and speak Portuguese have said, well, that is true. You can use this as saying bro. But the way he used it in the context that he used it, he called Lewis Hamilton an N-word.
Essentially. Actually, Nico Rosberg had something to say about this.
No, don't bring that.
No. We have to bring it up because this is former teammate and former world champion Nico Rosberg, and he actually posted this on, I believe this is his Instagram story. He says, quote, I cannot believe anyone would be racist towards Lewis Hamilton, the man I beat in 2016 in the same machinery. Racism has got to end. It cannot win, just like Lewis Hamilton racing against me in 2016. I stand with Lewis Hamilton, who I beat in 2016. So obviously he has some strong feelings towards the comments, and especially, there was a slight rivalry between, not even slight, there was a rivalry between Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton, who he beat in 2016. But it's interesting to see him taking up for Lewis, and, obviously this has caused outrage. So
you do realize that was a troll post, right?
It's a troll post, yes. I'm going along with the troll post that Nico Rosberg made for Lewis Hamilton, who he actually beat in 2016, by the way. So yeah, it's interesting.
It's interesting. But anyway,
did he beat him in 2016?
I don't know. Yes, he did. But actually, Lewis Hamilton responded to this by saying on a tweet saying, quote, it's more than language. These archaic mindsets need to change and have no place in our sport. I've been surrounded by these attitudes and targeted my whole life. There has been plenty of time to learn. Time has come for action, end quote. So Lewis wants action done, and the rumor is that Nelson Piquet, even though he apologized, but he really didn't apologize in his apology statement, essentially defending himself.
A roundabout apology.
Yeah. He's been banned from ever attending the Formula 1 event. His paddock pass has been revoked, and now he's not welcome.
What side do you take on this?
Oh, you know what he said.
So you don't think he meant it in the bro term? You think he just said that to defend himself?
I know Hispanic people, I myself am Hispanic. Trust me, they're very racist, and he did not mean that as in a bro way. Because if you're in an interview, they won't say that. They wouldn't say that. They'd just say, oh, well, Lewis or he, or, something like that. No, he called him the N-word. That's what he meant. And some people are saying, oh, like, again, with the Yuri Vips, oh, everybody's too much of a snowflake. Oh, this and that. And it's like, no, you can understand why everybody's mad. In fact, there's a reason why this story broke in Brazil, and then it broke everywhere else in the world.
No, I mean, and it's just the context around it. And again, it's back to the Yuri situation, just saying it. You know what it means. You know how people are going to perceive it. Why would you even just come out and say that in a casual conversation? So,
and what's actually a little bit interesting is Nelson Piquet is from Brazil. Lewis Hamilton is actually an honorary citizen of Brazil because the people love him over there.
Huh.
So, yeah, Lewis Hamilton has now become the most successful Brazilian, right behind Ayrton Senna, although he cannot beat Ayrton Senna's popularity.
Well, he also, in 2016, he couldn't beat Nico Rosberg. So,
Yes, he couldn't be. But anyway, that was my side of the stories. I know there was a lot of things else going on, but I didn't really feel like watching anything. I got the new F1 2022 game. I love it. There's a lot of glitches there, and I mean, it's an EA game. I expected those.
It'll get patched.
It'll get patched, but so far it's a good game. If you've never played it, play it. That's a little review thing. Anyway, take us home, white boy.
Well, we're going to move right into the interview with Bog Kyle Kavanaugh, so please stay tuned, listen to that, tell us what you think, and how long is this segment going to be? About 30 minutes?
Yeah, give or take.
Yeah, about the remaining 30 minutes is going to be the interview, and we'll meet you on the other side of the interview with a quick wrap-up of the episode. So please enjoy, and thank you for listening. Peace.
Well, I mean, skipping time right now and going to World War II, how did that affect the football teams and the clubs? Because I know the Germans were bombing all over. So were all ancient stadiums or team headquarters destroyed during that time period?
Yeah, so the stadium actually was eventually in World War, during when that happened. The stadium actually took a massive, it got hit pretty hard. So the stadium was actually bombed during a German air raid. So yeah, so basically what happened was they destroyed the main stand, they destroyed dressing rooms, and they destroyed offices. So yeah, that was a very huge blow. So at the time period, because of how that happened, what they had to do is they had to play in Manchester City's ground until they had to repair Old Trafford. So yeah, for a good few years, we spent our time on playing at City's main road. So yeah, that's how that came about.
And that's like a situation that, like, for us Americans, that's like, you can't even think about what that would be like. Imagine seeing on the news, your favorite team's headquarters was bombed. That's not even a afterthought for us. But I mean, back then, with everything that was going on, I guess that was,
Well, I think they had a bigger fish to fry at that point with the Germans.
Well, I mean, yes, of course, but
But I'm pretty sure they saw a huge number of people from Manchester join the war. Get a little payback from their stadium.
Hit Liverpool, not us. Hit Liverpool.
Yeah. So yeah, basically the players, some of them players that actually was among the scandal actually ended up fighting for World War One. So a guy named Sandy Turnbull was among that, but he ended up fighting for battling, for the war. But he was killed during battle in France. So yeah, basically,
how many of those 7 players came back home?
Oh, so are you talking about the wartime? Oh.
Yeah, the wartime. Was it the players that got suspended?
So at the time, when they were involved in that scandal, they were banned for life. Like, they just couldn't return back. They did spend 4 years like getting it sorted out, but as soon as it got sorted out, that was it. Like once they were over it, were over for them. But yeah, some of them did end up fighting for the war, but some of them didn't really make it back alive. I mean, I'm not 100% sure how many came back. It doesn't really. Nothing really was explained about that.
After the ban, you don't hear about them anymore.
I think maybe they came back as fans. Maybe they was like watching the games, but playing wise, they won't be playing again. But yeah.
So here's the question for me: how did the war affect football? Because obviously, after especially World War II, after the bombings, after all that went on with the Germans and the Italians, you guys must have, like, the economy was crap. Let's be honest. The only one who had a proper economy at that time was the Americans. But how did that affect football overall? Did it have a big impact on it, or was it, well, as soon as people were coming back and things were settling down, they were just going back to watching games, or how did it affect it?
Well, financially, it affected everybody massively, but it really did affect United really hard. They more or less didn't really recover for years after it, really. So, like, physically wise, like, everything were intact. Like, nothing were bombed back then, or at least not to my knowledge. I think everything only got bombed during the Second World War, but the First World War, I don't think any damage was done to the ground. But the main part that was really damaged was financial damage. So they've lost a crap ton of money because of it, because they couldn't play in the stadium for 4 years. Neither did any other clubs. So how they all managed to recover, I have no idea. But what I do know is a guy that I've mentioned, Billy Meredith, and he was still at Old Trafford at that time, but he was reaching the end of his career. So it was.
And here's another question: how many teams from the old days, like the really old days, ended up just dying away because they, like you said, they couldn't play for 4 years. They really couldn't play because of the war. And how many of them did actually just ended up going away just because they couldn't recover financially from it?
I'm not 100% sure, but I reckon back then, if I could probably take a guess, out of, like, say, I don't know, let's say at the time 20 teams, because that's how many we've got now. So let's say out of 20 teams, maybe only one managed to get dissolved completely. So, but the likes of Liverpool, Manchester City, Everton, Bolton, bloody Preston, whatever, they were all fine. So, Derby County, yeah, all of them were fine, because they're all here today to playing games. But back then, maybe they only just managed to survive. I don't know. I mean, I can't really speak on behalf of other clubs, but I know I can speak on behalf of my own, and obviously my own club only just scraped damage for the skin of the teeth, basically. But they were heavily in debt. Still are, basically. They're still heavily in debt, but back then they were in massive debt. It didn't seem like a lot of money back then, but back then it was a lot to them. So
yeah, when you adjust for inflation, it's a lot of money.
Oh, tell me about it. But so yeah, obviously financial difficulty did impact United quite a lot. So we will get to all that. But so basically what happened was, after the war healed up, like escalated and all that, the Football League returned in August of 1919, following a 4-year gap caused by that First World War. So for the team for the first match back against Derby County included, like, many new faces, and in fact, I mean, actually, there were only 2 men on duty that had played in United's previous league game at the end of 14-15. So out of everybody that played at United at that time in 14-15 season, only 2 of them were still remaining at United, because other players were obviously in the scandal and some were killed. So, yeah. And one of those men were Billy Meredith, who was the guy that was still at Old Trafford. So he was one of them 2 men. So obviously he was getting on. He was coming to the end of his career at Old Trafford. So this, in his final season, he made 19 appearances in the 1919-20 season, when United finished 12th in the first division. So then they had to go and find a new face. So one of our old United legends is about to enter the chat now, and that's a guy named Joe Spence. So, and he finished as the season's team top goal scorer at that time with 14 league goals. So out of every team in the league, he scored the most goals, even though they finished 12th. So he kind of more or less carried the team at that time period. and then a few years later, actually no, it was the next season afterwards. He was also the top goal scorer with I don't know how many goals. It didn't really specify back then. I would believe it was the same number of goals, so we'll say 14 league goals again. Mind you, basically they finished in 13th place at that time. So it was so they did drop a league at standing at that time. So at the time, the manager at the time, a man named John Robson, he left that club at that time from finishing 13th, and then was replaced by a man who was named John Chapman. So he reverted to the due role of secretary/manager that was last held by our previous manager called JJ Bentley. And meanwhile, former manager Ernest Mangel continued to make the local headlines with Manchester City as they moved to their new stadium at Main Road, which we was at in World War II for a brief period. So Mangel also re-signed Meredith for City, and despite his advancing years, it was perhaps no coincidence that United were relegated in their first season without him. So at that time, United won only 8 of their 42 matches in the 2021-22 season. So at the time they had 42 matches back then. So the number has dropped significantly from the matches that we have now. So
that is a ridiculous number of matches.
Yep. So that'll probably be on average at least 2 games a week, or maybe sometimes 3 or 4, depending on what month it is. So that's good times. So
wow.
At the time, I know, crazy. So Chapman's team managed to climb out of the second division at the 3rd attempt. So when the on-field leadership of a player named Frank Barson helped ensure promotion at the end of the 24-25 season. United finished second to Leicester City after losing only 8 games. So they didn't quite win the second division title at that time, but they did still get promotion because they were in the second slot. So I think only 2 teams were allowed to be promoted at that time, and we got second at that time. So United's top flight status was cemented with a 9th place finish in the season after the 25-26 season. And then Chapman's team also went on a great run in the FA Cup. But this all came to a halt in the semi-finals when Manchester City beat them 3-0 at Bramall Lane in Sheffield. And then City's luck ran out as they both lost the final to Bolton in their place in the first division. So 2 months into the 26-27 season, they had troubles when the FA suspended manager Chapman with immediate effect, the reasons which never really became public. So, and still to this day, nobody knows why he was let go. So, very mental stuff that. So at the time, then, wing half Clarence Hilditch, I think that's how I pronounce his name off the top of my head. So Clarence Hilditch took over as a player manager while the club looked for a more permanent replacement. So it was. So at the time, he was like an interim manager basically. So he was a player on the pitch as well as the manager until they could find a permanent replacement. So he was, but at the time though, the player was reluctant to actually pick himself. So, and obviously that team suffered. So they eventually found Chapman's permanent successor, a guy named Herbert Bamlett later arrived. It was already known to United fans as the referee who called the club's FA Cup quarter-final tie at Burnley in 1909, when the team was trailing 1-0 in the midst of a blizzard. So Bamlett threw, though it was called to blow the final whistle. So Charlie Roberts had to do the job, and United went on to win the cup that season. So yeah, lovely referee.
Lovely.
But sadly, Bamlett had no further impact on United's success as their manager. The team slowly dipped down at the first division, finishing 15th in the 26-27 season, and then 18th in the 27-28 season, only to recover slightly to the end of the 12th in 1928-29. And Spence continues to score goals by the bucket load, but not even he could stop United's steady decline. So yeah, Spence was a very one of United's first legends at the time. So he more or less carried that team. Without him, the team would probably still be relegated quite a lot, maybe even further down. So we're going to be going into the 1930 to 39 years now. So the 30s. So that's where we're up to now. So yeah, so the decline had started in the 1920s and continued on the outset of the 30s, as United finished 17th in the 29-30 season to fill the fans with dread.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was that. So their fears were realised in the next season when United made the worst start in their history by losing their first 12 league matches in a row. Not here and there, but in a row. So those dozen defeats included a back-to-back thrashings at Old Trafford. This includes a 6-0 loss by Huddersfield Town, and then an absolutely ridiculous 7-4 loss by Newcastle United. So the Reds eventually lost 27 out of 42 league matches in 1930-31, conceding 115 goals, and relegation led to manager Herbert Bamlett bowing out. And secretary, relegation. So yeah, they were relegated that season. So with Herbert, the manager bowing out, the secretary Walter Crickmer was taking charge of the team affairs. So the patience of the supporters was being severely tested, and many of them did not hang around. So bear in mind, the stadium is an 80,000 capacity stadium. So bear this in mind.
That's a hell of a stadium right there.
Yeah. So for the opening match of the relegation season, only 3,507 fans turned up for the opening match of the following season. An 80,000 seater stadium, but only 3,000 plus turned up. That's how bad that was back then.
Yeah, that's bad, all right.
Oh, yes. So as that season went on, the situation deteriorated even from there. So by December, there was no money to pay the players' wages. So they couldn't. So at the time, they didn't get any pay for Christmas. So, and then bankruptcy was really close. It was a real threat to them. So, but it wasn't until the club's saviour came in the shape of a guy named James Gibson, a manufacturer of army uniforms. So he invested.
This is during the 1930s, right?
Yep, the 1930s.
So at this point in the U.S., we're going through the Great Depression. Everything, like, our money's worth shit. What was it like for people over there?
I'm not entirely sure. I wasn't I wasn't really taught that much about that back then, but I'm assuming it was very similar. Like I think maybe the depression hit us as well. But I'll have to look that up later. Might be one
Yeah,
to look at.
because I'm wondering if
Yeah.
that also has to play into why not a lot of people could go if there's poverty going around all over the UK. I'm pretty sure a lot of teams weren't drawing people because there wasn't any money to spend.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, I think maybe back then it affected us as well. So yeah, so at the time, James Gibson invested 30 grand in and paid the players and got things back on track. He appointed a new manager named Scott Duncan, who was given money to spend. However, he did not make the most of it. A dreadful run under Duncan in the 1933-34 season took United to the brink of being relegated into the third division for the first time in their club's history.
Wow, the third division.
Yep. So at the time, a third division was invented and created, and United was very close to being in that division.
Wait, so they were about to go not just from 1 to 2; they were about to skip all the way to the bottom from 1 to 3.
So they were in the second division at that time, and then they were going to go into the third.
Oh, okay, I got you.
Yeah. So survival was only secured on the last day of that season when they beat Millwall 2-0 with goals from players named Tom Manley and Jack Cape. And at the time, Millwall was also strugglers. So when we beat them, Millwall was sent down to that division instead. So, and in that same week, Manchester City won the FA Cup with a man named Matt Busby in their side, and more on him later. So, United finished the 1934-35 season in 5th place. And then in the following term claimed their first silverware of the decade. Unbeaten during the last 19 games of the campaign, the Reds, Manchester United, secured the second division championship with a 3-2 win over Bury at Gig Lane. So, and Bury is actually located not too far from Manchester, not too far from where I live as well, in Rochdale. So, and Gig Lane is a story in its own self as well, which I'll explain that to you guys at a later stage. So, at the end of that season, from the second division, suggested United would do well returning to the top flight. But by Christmas, the side had only won 4 matches, including one on Christmas Day itself. So, only 10 wins in the whole season led to relegation. Back down to the second division they went. And Man City's fortunes again proving in stark contrast as they were crowned league champions with that guy named Matt Busby. And we will get to him again. So
they're just constantly going just up and down and up and down. And as soon as they get a chance, they just drop back down again.
That was... Yeah, and that's what a yo-yo club is. That's what it is.
Yeah.
So they go up and down in the league. So that's what they were doing. They were being that yo-yo club. So
and they'll be like, well, hold on. We might give you a chance here. We'll move you back up. And then they give them that opportunity, and then the next year they're just back down to shit. So, I mean, at what point has there ever been a team that they were just like, no, we're not letting you go back up ever again? Because, like, every time we give you an opportunity, you just flop.
Do you know what? This has been a question that many fans answer. So there's a team called Norwich City that are basically doing what United are doing now, which is basically hopping from the Premier League to the Championship, and they keep going up and down, and they've been doing that for years. So basically Manchester United back then were doing that, but Norwich were doing that. And I think what they should do is every time they get sent down, they won't be able to come back up again for another season. Instead of giving it to whoever. So let's say if they end up getting top, they still won't be able to get to the Premier League because they were already relegated the season prior. And I think that should be a rule, in my opinion, but it's not, unfortunately. So even if they do get dropped, they'll just get coming right back up again, and it just doesn't seem fair on the rest of the clubs, really. But it's a good question. It's a It's a question that hopefully the FA will one day sort down the line.
Wait, so they can get moved up and down in the middle of the season, or no? They have to wait until the season's over to be moved up or down.
Exactly. So let's say if they were already relegated but still have a few games left to play, they'll still have to play those games up until they either get dropped or whether they get promoted. And that is when the season will end. So, my bloody cat keeps meowing. Oh, wait. So basically the yo-yoing continued as United were promoted again the next season in the 1937-38 season, as they became runners up to Aston Villa. So manager Duncan could only claim some of the credit as he left the club in November of 1937 to take charge of Ipswich Town. So Walter Crickmer again stepped in the breach as United caretaker manager. So the highlight of Duncan and Crickmer's season was the discovery of a guy named Johnny Carey, who would later be recognised as one of the greatest fullbacks in football history.
Left of the Cyberpunk.
So playing 32 games and scoring 6 goals in a more advanced role, the Irishman helps United stay up this time, finishing 14th, while City took their turn to be relegated. There was no time to gloat, however. The outbreak of war put the Football League on hold again for several years. So now we're coming up to the outbreak of the Second World War now. So that was
it's interesting. So the European League basically put football on hold altogether, correct?
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
in the NFL, they merged team. Like we had the Philadelphia and the Pittsburgh Steagles. We merged the Philadelphia Eagles and the Pittsburgh Steelers together to make one team because neither team had enough players. And they still tried to have a season, but it was with a bunch of like older guys that couldn't pass a physical. So it was just some of the worst American football you've ever seen in your life. So, but what Europe did with European football seems a lot smarter than what we did because it was an awful, awful season.
Well, I mean, the war was in their backyard. That's the thing. That you couldn't really have any games because they were being invaded by the Germans or the Italians.
Yeah, and that's a good point right there.
Yeah. But yeah, and also a really good, interesting fact, which I never actually knew about this as well up until when I was doing my research on doing this little podcast, was at the time when the Second World War was a thing, the army was actually using our ground to hold storage. So, for example, they were there.
The facility?
Yeah, so they were so basically the army, when if they ever needed guns or whether they needed, I don't know, their little devices, it were all being stored at Old Trafford, which is why the stadium got bombed in the first place. So it might have just been like one.
Now.
Yes, and at the time that's what I thought. So yeah, at the time, even though it might have been just a random little attack, chances are they might have done it deliberately because of that fact. But yeah, it was something I never even knew about. Yeah, something I never even knew about, and obviously I've followed United all these years, But yeah, it was a very fun fact. So obviously, and then I explained to you as well that the bombing took place on March 11th of 1941. So the attack destroyed, obviously, the dressing rooms, the offices. We mentioned all that. So it came with a man. So you remember when I told you about Matt Busby? So
Yes.
Yeah.
that right.
The
So
Busby
that guy.
babes.
Oh yes, we will get to them. So Matt Busby was then appointed as our manager post that war. So and the interesting fact about Matt Busby is he served as a sergeant major in World War II, along with the future Manchester City manager and the future Liverpool manager. So
Really?
Busby served in the 9th Battalion of the King's Liverpool Regiment. So so those leadership qualities shone through, and obviously that did not go unnoticed at United. So
That's very interesting.
So Matt Busby, he actually was very close to not living out his dream as a footballer. So Matt Busby, at the time, he was a very young man. He was 18 years old, and he was the only breadwinner of the family. So he was struggling to keep bringing in money for his family to feed them, basically, because I think his dad tragically died in the First World War. So so he was a young man struggling, and his family became very close to immigrating to New York to try and set up a better life from there. But it wasn't until Manchester City came to the ground unannounced to his ends and offered him a contract to come and play with Man City. So in a way, we've got to thank Manchester City in a way, because without them, who knows, we might not have even had Busby or the Busby babes to come. So, there's an interesting fact for you. So he spent a few years at City, and then he spent a few years at Liverpool. And then it was after that's when the World War II came about, and then he ended up fighting alongside the other managers, and then he actually managed the Army's football team at the time when they were having their little games to pass the time to get ready for the war. And obviously that and it was that, and when he gained the necessary experience to then become a future manager at a professional level. And that's that story of Matt Busby in a nutshell. Matt Busby ended up joining Manchester United in 1945, initially on a 5-year contract. But little did anybody know that he would still be managing the club for 25 years. So he is easily one of our longest serving managers and one of our most successful managers.
Yeah, definitely better than what you have right now.
Yeah. So the young manager did not waste any time on his mark, altering the positions of several key players. He also founded the famous Five, which were basically forwards he brought in together. So these were the men named Jimmy Delaney, Stan Pearson, Jack Rawley, Charlie Mitten, and Johnny Morris. So those are the names of the famous Five. So perhaps the most important signing Busby ever made was on the coaching staff. And so Matt Busby had met a man named Jimmy Murphy during the war and identified him as a perfect right-hand man. So the pair formed a partnership that would see United become an absolute powerhouse in world football. Don't I swig of my drink there? Pardon me. So Busby and Murphy's first steps on the road to glory was to build a team that was capable of challenging for domestic honours. They succeeded almost at the first attempt. At United finished second, only behind Liverpool, in the First League campaign after the war of 1946-47. It was so it was the club's highest placing in 36 years. So, and after there was extra cause for optimism when their reserves won their Central League Championship in the same season. So yeah, Manchester United's reserve team, who barely ever plays in the main division, ended up winning the Central League Championship. So Busby's mix of young lads and established players lifted their first trophy the following year when beating the Blackpool side of Stanley Matthews, Stan Mawson and Harry Johnson in the 1948 FA Cup final. So, and that FA Cup was won 39 years to the day United had previously won the cup in 1909.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that FA Cup, the FA Cup was also the club's first major honour since winning the league championship back in 1911. So yeah, I mean, so Busby already setting up the things that was to come.
See, that's interesting. That's very interesting right there.
Aye. So during the 5 seasons of the post-war reign, United finished second on 4 different occasions and 4th on another, which was back in 1949-50 season. So yeah, so they were so about so they went from being a yo-yo club to at least challenging for the league title. Not quite there, but getting there.
Better than before.
So, absolutely, 100%. So the thrill of the chase of honours brought the fans flooding back in. Yeah, so, and at the time, more than 1 million of them passed through the turnstiles in the 1947-48 season. So, dragging the club out of debt. So, yeah, we were officially debt-free at that point. It just shows that success does end up, giving you the benefits.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So yeah, that was that. So now we're going to be gearing up now to the 1950 season all the way through to the 1959. So we're going to be spanning the 50s now.
Well, thank you for listening to this interview, and we hope you enjoyed this episode of the Waterboy Experience. We also want to say, if you want to reach out to us on Instagram or Twitter, it is open. Text us in the DMs and tell us what you think of the show, how we can improve it. We'll always take constructive criticism. You can just rant to us and say how much you hate us and hate our opinions. That's perfectly fine. We might leave you on red, or I might respond in a way that you probably won't like. But we want to see fan interaction. We want to be able to make shows that you want to hear and that you're interested in. So please reach out to us. Tell us what you think. Tell us how we can improve, and tell us what you want to hear about. You can also send in questions you want us to answer. But yeah, find us on Instagram at the Waterboy Pod, and on Twitter, just type in the Waterboy Podcast or the Waterboy Experience, and you'll find us on Twitter. Thank you for listening to this episode. We hope you enjoy the next episode, and stay tuned for more information. Peace out.
Second and goal just outside the 10. Hart tips it in, and it's Ward. He spins into the end zone for the touchdown. Watching greatness on one end in LeBron. There's a dude with 35 in white getting it done defensively, and then offense taking